Welcome to the deep dive. We're opening up the inbox of Australian employment law today, and it is full of shock and, frankly, expense.
That's right.
We're navigating that razor-thin and sometimes incredibly costly line between a lawful termination and what the Fair Work Commission calls an unfair dismissal.
Absolutely. We've been digging into research and some case analysis, looking at sources from organizations like the Australian Workplace Discrimination Representatives, AWDR.
Okay.
And they really give us a full picture of modern Australian workplace conflict. We're synthesizing sources, detailing everything from, toxic environments and discrimination right through to adverse action. And we're showing precisely where employers make these critical, expensive errors, often by just ignoring due process.
So our mission today is really to cut through the jargon, uncover those core rights employees often, well, maybe aren't aware of under the Fair Work Act and equal opportunity laws. And we're going to use two recent, pretty eye-opening Fair Work Commission cases from 2025 to illustrate the real financial damage poor procedural fairness can cause. Especially, and this is the kicker, when an employer thinks they can just fire someone with a quick text message.
Yeah, the text message issue keeps coming up.
Okay, let's unpack this landscape then.
Right. So if we look at the issues that employees are seeking help for, the kind of things organizations like AWDR assist with, it's a really broad spectrum. It's much more complex than just, say, standard unfair dismissal.
Right.
Employees frequently need help with general protection disputes.
Okay, hold on. Can you just clarify that for the listener? What does general protection disputes actually mean in practice?
Yeah, it's crucial. It essentially means the employee faced some kind of adverse action like being fired, disciplined, maybe demoted
Okay.
because they exercised a specific workplace right. This is often the strongest area of protection. It covers things like making a formal complaint, taking legally required leave, or even just asking about their pay. It's basically illegal retaliation.
So if an employee asks for, say, better safety gear and then suddenly gets fired for poor performance, that could fall under general protections.
Exactly. That's a classic potential example, even if the employer tries to label it something else. Other big areas are, of course, sexual harassment, discrimination, and these quite complicated scenarios like constructive dismissal.
Ah, yes, constructive dismissal, where it gets so bad you feel you have no choice but to leave.
Precisely. The employer makes the environment so intolerable, resigning feels like the only option. And also disputes around non-genuine redundancy claims. That's another common one.
And the sources we looked at, they specifically highlight AWDR. They describe them as Australia's leading non-lawyer workplace and discrimination representative firm. They specialize in negotiation, mediation, and FWC representation.
Yeah, and that non-lawyer distinction is pretty important. Their focus is more on workplace relations, strategy, and advocacy, maybe less on formal court litigation. But the guiding principle is universal. Employees deserve a safe, respectful, inclusive environment. They work on strategy, helping individuals from all sorts of backgrounds stand up against practices that violate the Fair Work Act.
And sometimes just having someone who can synthesize those complex rights for you, well, that's half the battle, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Right. Let's move from the broad landscape into the specific, and frankly, some incredibly foolish decisions employers have made recently. I want to dive straight into the Ilias Kaji v. Sigma resourcing case from 2025. The facts here are just startling. Not just the penalty, but the catalyst was so simple. A pay review request.
It really is quite something. Mr. Kaji had a decade of service. 10 years at this Sydney recruitment firm.
10 years.
Yeah. And he'd asked for a pay review multiple times before. When he finally pressed the issue again, the director got defensive straight away. Actually admitted the worker had him by the balls and claimed the company was struggling massively.
Wow. Okay. That initial reaction tells you a lot about the atmosphere, but the escalation, that's the key legal trigger.
That's it. The director offered a modest $5,000 increase. Mr. KG accepted.
Yeah.
But, the money never actually appeared. And that's when the relationship really deteriorated. Mr. Kaji sent an email complaining about this history of, and these were his words, broken and false promises.
Okay. Understandably frustrated.
Yes. And the director's response was immediate, aggressive, and twofold. First, falsely claiming the worker was already on a higher salary, which wasn't true. And second, crucially, blocking his email access. Just cut him off, preventing him from doing his job.
Right. Here's where that convenience of modern tech leads straight to massive liability. Blocking his access, that could be seen as constructive dismissal right there, essentially barring him from work.
It absolutely could be argued that way,
Huh?
but the actual final termination, That happened via text message.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, the director texted him, first sort of tested the water, saying, I think it's time to terminate the employment. You agree?
As if he would just agree to be fired.
Exactly. Mr. Kaji refused, naturally, said he'd done nothing wrong. So then came the director's final definitive text. Okay, I'm terminating you with immediate effect.
Wow. A 10-year relationship ended in a single sentence text. It's hard to fathom. So what was the employer's defense when this inevitably ended up before the Fair Work Commission?
Well, Sigma Resourcing tried, I guess you could say, a rather desperate defense. They argued Mr. KG hadn't actually been fired at all.
What?
They claimed he had abandoned his employment because he didn't work after his email access was blocked.
But they blocked his access. How could he work?
Precisely. The commission dismissed that argument completely. They found the termination was crystal clear, intentional, and initiated solely by the director via that text message.
What's really fascinating here is the commission's reasoning for finding it unfair. It wasn't just that there was no valid reason for sacking him, because asking for your promised pay isn't a valid reason.
Not at all.
It was the total lack of procedural fairness.
Exactly that. No valid reason, and they denied him any chance to respond. When we talk procedural fairness, we mean, the basics. Giving the employee notice of what the problem supposedly is, allowing them a proper chance to explain their side, and then actually considering that response before making a final decision.
And the text message just bypassed everything.
Skipped all 3 steps, instantly.
So the financial hit, what was the damage?
The commission ordered Sigma Resourcing to pay Mr. Kadji $44,450.84, plus just over $5,100 in superannuation.
Yeah.
So yeah, nearly $50,000 total.
50 grand.
And this was calculated based on 6 months of lost earnings. But the commission was also pretty harsh on the payment schedule.
How so?
Well, the company pleaded financial hardship, struggling massively, and asked for a year to pay it off. But the FWC said no. They only allowed a 6-week payment plan.
6 weeks for nearly $50,000. That seems incredibly strict.
It is. And it really seems to reflect the commission's view on how poor that dismissal was, especially that abrupt text after a decade of service.
It feels almost like a punishment for the process, even though the law says compensation isn't meant to be punitive.
Well, technically, the compensation amount is tied strictly to the lost wages, but the strictness around when that money must be paid, you could certainly argue that's influenced by the lack of respect and due process shown. The employer's hardship claim definitely took a backseat to the employee's immediate need after such a, disrespectful sacking.
Speaks volumes, doesn't it? Okay, let's shift gears to our second case. This one highlights, again, poor communication, maybe the fragility of a friendly work relationship, and critically, the protection employees have when taking legitimate sick leave. This is Mr. Jorge Borlandelli v. Sydney Luxury Smash Repairs.
Right, Mr. Borlandelli, a panel beater. And supposedly he was good friends with the owner, Jackson Pierce. Yeah. That friendship seemed to dissolve pretty quickly when Mr. Borlandelli texted before 5 a.m. one morning reporting severe lower back pain. Said he just couldn't move.
Okay, legitimate reason to call in sick.
You'd think so.
Yeah.
But the owner's initial response completely ignored the injury. He texted back, "Fress sakes," and then complained the worker had so much fucking time off.
Oh, dear. Not exactly professional or sympathetic.
Not at all.
Ah.
And despite Mr. Borlandelli then providing 2 valid medical certificates covering his absence, the owner decided the friendship and the employment was over. Sent a final text. Don't bother coming back. Just come pick up your tools on Saturday.
So again, summary dismissal by text. Triggered by frustration over sick leave. But knowing that temporary absence due to injury is a protected right under the Fair Work Act, how did the owner try and defend this one? Surely he didn't say, I fired him for being sick.
No, of course not. He tried to completely change the story after the fact. Post-termination, the employer attempted to, let's say, recast the reason.
Recast it. How?
Claimed Mr. Borlandelli was actually fired for poor performance and unauthorized absences. It's a really common tactic, trying to invent a valid reason after you've already fired someone for an unlawful one.
But did the defense hold up? Did they have proof?
Not remotely. It completely collapsed because the evidence was just so weak. The employer's proof consisted of a list of alleged absences, apparently compiled by the owner's wife, which the commission rejected outright as vague hearsay evidence. There was no contemporary credible documentation, nothing recorded at the time.
And I love this detail from the case. Mr. Borlandelli, the employee, actually used his own Google Maps location data to disprove some of the employer's claims about where he supposedly was or wasn't on certain dates.
Yeah, that's using technology to fight back. It really hammers home that the burden of proof lies squarely with the employer. If they rely on flimsy hearsay or stuff made up after the event, it just won't fly. The commission was very clear. The actual reason for the sacking was his temporary absence due to injury, and that is absolutely a protected workplace right. Therefore, the dismissal was unjust and unreasonable. Full stop.
Okay, so clearly unfair. But in this case, the final compensation payout was much lower than the nearly $50,000 in the first case. Why the big difference?
Right, and this is a really critical legal distinction for you, the listener, to grasp. Mr. Borlandelli, because of his back injury, was already receiving workers' compensation payments.
Ah, okay.
And those payments essentially covered his likely lost earnings for the period the FWC would normally calculate compensation for, say, the next 6 months. Since compensation orders under the Fair Work Act are only meant to cover the actual financial loss suffered by the employee, and crucially, they're not meant to be a penalty or punishment for the employer.
Right. Compensatory, not punitive.
Exactly. The FWC couldn't award him again for lost wages he was already effectively receiving through workers' comp.
So what did he get then?
The payout was limited to compensation for 2 weeks of lost wages in lieu of notice, because he was sacked summarily without notice. That came to about $5,400 plus superannuation.
So it was still found to be an extremely unfair dismissal, but the dollar amount was lower purely because of the interaction with the workers' compensation system.
Precisely. The commission even acknowledged the sacking was extremely unfair, but the financial outcome was constrained by that legal principle. The aim is to make the employee financially whole again relative to the dismissal, not necessarily to punish the employer based on how badly they behaved.
That clarifies that distinction perfectly. Okay, let's distill this. What are the, say, 3 foundational lessons here for anyone navigating these waters, whether you're an employer or an employee?
Okay, lesson 1 has to be the absolute necessity of documentation. Solid contemporary documentation. Both employers in these cases failed because they lacked credible evidence. They were running on frustration, hearsay, maybe things cobbled together afterwards. Conversely, the employees succeeded partly because they had the proof medical certificates, and in Borlandelli's case, even using his own tech data to counter the vague claims. Keep your records.
Good advice. Lesson 2.
Procedural fairness. It's just non-negotiable. Whether you're a company struggling financially like Sigma, or you think you're firing a friend like in the Smash Repairs case, a summary dismissal, especially via text, is almost certainly going to be deemed unjust if challenged.
So the key steps, again, are:
give proper notice of the specific allegations or concerns, allow the employee a genuine opportunity to respond fully, and then actually consider that response before making any final termination decision. If you skip those, you're basically writing a potentially large check later on.
Got it. And lesson 3.
Urgency. The sources we looked at consistently stress this. For unfair dismissal claims, and also general protection claims involving dismissal, the time frames for lodging an application with the Fair Work Commission are strict, really strict.
How strict?
Often as short as 21 days from the date the dismissal takes effect. That's not much time at all.
Wow, only 3 weeks.
Exactly. So if you face this situation, you need to seek advice and act very quickly to preserve your rights and potentially secure compensation.
Yeah.
Don't wait.
Right. And connecting this back to the broader support landscape we mentioned earlier, these cases really underscore that employee rights aren't just theoretical concepts on paper.
Not at all.
The law is robust. It covers everything from victimization, non-genuine redundancy claims, even requires support during workplace investigations sometimes. It shows the real depth of protection under Australian law if you know where to look and act in time.
Absolutely.
You know, these 2025 cases serve as such a stark reminder. Modern technology, like tasking, has made it frighteningly easy for employers to act on impulse, maybe in anger or frustration.
Too easy sometimes.
But the moment an employer hits send on that dismissal text, they aren't just ending someone's job instantly. They're essentially sending an invitation for serious, time-consuming, and potentially very expensive scrutiny from the Fair Work Commission.
That's a great way to put it. While the tech makes communication instant, the fundamental legal requirements, respect, process, having a valid reason, these remain rooted in decades-old principles of fairness and due process. They haven't changed.
So the final provocative thought for you, the listener.
It's this. In our increasingly digital workplaces, how often does the sheer convenience of that send button tempt employers to just sacrifice due process, to take the shortcut? And perhaps more importantly for you, what responsibility do you as an employee have to proactively understand your rights before that termination text ever lands in your inbox?
Excellent point. Knowing your rights really is your best and perhaps only defense. That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Until next time.